On this Saturday night, Canada Day celebrations and suspensions. Wild weather threatens to upstage the big show in Ottawa, but it doesn't dampen the spirit.
I'm actually very excited because it's like our country.
And we hear from the First Nations artist at center stage on how his music honors his family history. Highlighting hidden history's 100 years since the Exclusion Act.
In the letter, it talks about the fact that, you know, it's been 10 years since I saw you.
A unique look at the legacy of the immigration ban in the country's first Chinese-Canadian museum, now open in Vancouver. BC port operations halted.
This is something that affects every community in Canada and every family in Canada.
As thousands of workers are on strike, the wide-ranging job action and how it could impact global shipping. South Koreans get younger overnight. The new law changing the system for counting a person's age.
Global National with Mara Nasser. Reporting tonight, Neetu Gaksha.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We will get to Canada Day celebrations in a moment, but we begin with breaking news tonight in central Alberta, where a tornado appears to have touched down near the town of Didsbury.
I think there might be another one.
Witnesses caught video of the twister touching down about an hour north of Calgary today. RCMP say they received reports of a large tornado in the area this afternoon, ranging from 1 to 2 kilometers wide. Police say homes were damaged and there are reports of injuries. They will provide more information when it becomes available. There was also severe weather in the nation's capital, which threw a wrench into Canada Day plans. Thousands of people had gathered at Parliament Hill for festivities and performances when new warnings of thunderstorms and possibly tornadoes put the events on pause. Our chief political correspondent David Akin was at the daytime ceremony earlier today. He joins us now from Ottawa with more on the situation. David?
Now, late this afternoon, Environment Canada issued a thunderstorm warning and a tornado watch for the National Capital Region. And so, as a result, government officials have suspended Canada Day festivities. That said, the weather did cooperate enough today that a daytime ceremony was able to be completed. And at that ceremony, new Canadians were the stars of the show.
So my name is Ralph Sanzik.
Hi, my name is Jessica Sanzik.
A brother and sister from Haiti, sharing a very special day. Not Canada Day, though that of course is special too, but instead this, their first day as Canadian citizens.
So this is it, the moment you've been waiting for, the swearing of the oaths of citizenship.
Ralph and Jessica were among 17 people who became new Canadians at this National Canada Day ceremony.
I swear. That I will be faithful.
The Governor General and the Prime Minister joined in. And then,
Ralph, Jessica,
a welcome from the country's PM.
Canada is now officially your home. Welcome, my friends.
That was very emotional. Knowing the story, like going back to history, that was very, very emotional.
I know. He said my name. He said our names in his speech.
They even got a shout out from Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen, picked to be the first Canadian to visit the moon.
And I have to say, congratulations for everyone here is experiencing Canada Day as new citizens. Welcome to Canada.
I really I don't think I have enough words. I enjoyed every single second of it. Everything was just blew my mind.
It definitely was a celebration, and we felt that it definitely welcomed us in.
The ceremony closed with the national anthem. New Canadians singing their anthem for the first time as citizens.
We're home.
Yes.
A couple of days ago, Canada hit a really special milestone. The population of the country is now 40 million. That's right, 40 million Canadians. And these days, that population growth is driven by record high immigration levels as the country welcomes people like Jessica and Ralph. Neetu.
David Akin from the Canada Day celebrations in Ottawa. Thanks, David. As always, there are plenty of ways to celebrate Canada Day, but as night falls, not everyone will get to see the fireworks. There are bans on private pyrotechnics in many provinces because of the wildfire risks, and some cities have chosen other ways to celebrate. There will be fireworks across Atlantic Canada, with Charlottetown marking the 150th anniversary of PEI joining Confederation as Canada's 7th province. The fireworks display in Montreal has been cancelled over air quality concerns from smoke and wildfires. Ottawa is expected to have fireworks after tonight's national concert, but only if the weather cooperates. The City of Toronto has organized several fireworks displays. In Winnipeg, you can see a drone display downtown or fireworks at the racetrack on the western edge of the city. Regina and Saskatoon are both planning fireworks. The skies above Edmonton and Calgary will also light up after Calgary reversed a decision earlier this year to tone down its fireworks display. And Vancouver decided to cancel its fireworks, focusing instead on daytime activities in a spirit of Indigenous reconciliation. Several suburbs, however, will still have fireworks. Later in the broadcast, we'll speak with Akin, an Indigenous musician who's been chosen to play at the Canada Day celebrations in Ottawa, why he accepted the honor and how his grandfather helped shape his music. Now, though, we turn to France. A funeral service was held today for 17-year-old who is known as Nael. His killing by police unleashed days of unrest across the country. Rioting and looting raged in cities for a fourth night despite a deployment of 45,000 police officers. More than 1,300 people were arrested overnight. French President Emmanuel Macron has now postponed a planned state visit to Germany. Nael, a 17-year-old of Algerian and Moroccan descent, was fatally shot during a traffic stop on Tuesday. His death has reignited long-standing complaints by poor and racially mixed urban communities. A strike is now underway for thousands of port workers in British Columbia. Federally mediated talks failed to reach an agreement between the two sides. The ports, along with the West Coast, are critical for Canadian trade and global shipping. Global's Travis Prasad is following the story for us tonight. Travis?
Neetu, you can see the picketers behind me making the rounds outside of the Maritime Employers Office near the Vancouver port. They're just some of the more than 7,400 port workers who've walked off the job along BC's coast, bringing port operations to a halt. A sure sign of a strike. Negotiations between the International Longshore and Warehouse Union of Canada and the BC Maritime Employers Association went well into the night on Friday, but no progress was made.
There couldn't be a worse way to celebrate Canada Day than to deal with something like that.
It's job action on the West Coast that could devastate the entire country's supply chain, still in recovery from the pandemic.
We do about $800 million worth of trade through those ports every day, and about a quarter of the trade between Canada and the rest of the world passes through those ports. So this is something that affects every community in Canada and every family in Canada.
The union has been without a contract since March as it pushes for a new deal that addresses three key concerns: stop the erosion of work through outside contracts, protect jobs from port automation, and make sure earnings keep up with the cost of living. The Employers Association says their bargaining committee has made repeated efforts to be flexible and find compromise on key priorities, but regrettably the parties have yet to be successful in reaching a settlement. The union has not responded to requests for comment. Labour Minister Seamus O'Regan confirms both parties remain at the bargaining table and federal mediators are involved, hopeful for a timely resolution.
For every day that a strike goes ahead, it probably takes about a week for the supply chain to get back to normal. So if we look at a prolonged strike for 7 days, we could be looking at 28 to 2 months to get it back to normal.
And the supply chain impacts could last even longer than that. The Freight Management Association says with U.S. ports open, shipments could be diverted south of the border, with no guarantee of that business ever coming back to Canada. Neetu.
Travis Prasad in Vancouver tonight. Thanks, Travis. Remembering a controversial law 100 years later. Coming up, how the Exclusion Act negatively impacted thousands of Chinese Canadians. Plus, why millions of people in South Korea became younger overnight. This country's first museum dedicated to Chinese-Canadian history has opened its doors in Vancouver's Chinatown. It marks the 100th anniversary of a controversial 1923 law that halted Chinese immigration to Canada for decades. The museum's board chair says the date was chosen as a reminder of a part of Canadian history that's often overlooked. Its first exhibition is called The Paper Trail to the 1923 Chinese Exclusion Act. It showcases documents issued to Chinese Canadians to highlight their segregated status. A century on, many Chinese Canadians still feel conflicted over July 1st celebrations. Mike Drolet looks at how the shameful act shaped this country and several of the citizens who helped build it.
July 1st, with all the fireworks and celebrations to mark Confederation, has been known as Canada Day since 1982. Many Chinese Canadians have historically used a different name, Humiliation Day. 1920s Canada wasn't kind to the Chinese immigrants who, from the railroads through the gold rush, helped to build the country. As thanks and amidst openly racist articles and cartoons, the government enacted the Chinese Exclusion Act on July 1st, 1923, banning all immigration.
For the next 24 years, only less than 50 people of Chinese origin actually were allowed in.
Fred Wong's father paid a $500 head tax to enter Canada for work in 1922, returning to China briefly in 1933 to get married and father a child, and then didn't see either for another 13 years because of the Exclusion Act. The letters from his father, he says, are heartbreaking.
Also in the letter, it talks about the fact that, you know, it's been 10 years since I saw you.
After the Exclusion Act was abolished in 1947, paving the way to citizenship and the right to vote, his family was reunited. But he says they lived with the fear it could happen again.
It's something that was ingrained in me as a child. Basically stay out of trouble. Don't raise attention to yourself. Just, continue on, and move forward.
You're talking about one...
Newly elected Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow, the first Asian to hold the position, remembers when an older Chinese woman brought her husband's head tax certificate to her in 1983. She put out a call for more and had over 350 Chinese Canadians come forward.
And I pledged to them in 1983, I'll do what I can to seek justice. And by gosh, it took a long time.
23 years to be precise, before then Prime Minister Stephen Harper apologized in Chinese in the House of Commons. That, she said, mattered.
It was like an open wound that we felt that if you don't deal with it, people will not learn from history. And learning history means that hopefully it won't repeat itself.
July 1st will be a day of internal conflict for many Chinese Canadians who would much rather celebrate the good than revisit difficult memories. But they understand why, on the 100th anniversary, it needs to be remembered.
Canada is a society that we embrace diversity, we embrace tolerance, and we are perhaps one of the best multicultural societies in the world. And we need to remember that. We do have this painful past, so hopefully we'll not let that happen again.
Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
Suddenly years younger ahead, the South Korean law changing the age of its citizens. More than 50 million people in South Korea got a little bit younger this week. The country is changing the way people traditionally count their age. And for almost everyone, that means overnight they got to age backwards. Mike Armstrong explains.
There seem to be more jokes than complaints about what is for South Koreans a fairly big change, a turning back of the clock for everyone. This woman says she and her friends have been feeling great about getting younger.
Starting today, all South Koreans become younger.
Now, people aren't quite aging in reverse. The country is adopting what it calls the system of international age, dropping South Korea's traditional way of counting, in fact, two ways of counting. It's a little complicated. Now, here's how the system worked with the help of a major South Korean export, Squid Game. The main actor is 50 years old, but 52 in traditional Korean age and 51 in counting age. The actor was born December 15th, 1972. While the traditional South Korean system factors in the pregnancy, so when someone's born, they're already considered a year old. Then when the calendar year changes, they become another year old. Which means just a month after being born, the actor was in Korean age already considered 2 years old. The counting age system doesn't include the time in the womb, but you age a year each calendar year.
Thank you so much.
Those systems are being dropped almost entirely. The government says the new system should cut down on confusion and legal disputes. It came into effect Wednesday, although the other counting system does still apply to the age for school, conscription, and drinking, for now. This man says he was worried he'd be banned from buying alcohol because the legal drinking age is 19, and overnight he went from 20 to 18. Well, he's been grandfathered in. Polls show most South Koreans are behind the move. It does, after all, delay those big round benchmark birthdays, although some will have to turn 50 twice. And that really doesn't seem fair. Mike Armstrong, Global News.
Indigenous inspiration. Next, singer Akin reflects on his journey and heritage ahead of his Canada Day performance. The evocative voice of Akin from Sandy Lake First Nation in northwestern Ontario. Tonight, if the weather holds out, Akin will take the stage for the Canada Day celebrations in Ottawa. I spoke with him a little earlier today. Akin, thanks for joining us. First of all, can you tell us about your journey as a musician and how you got to where you are today?
You know, I started playing music when I was 12 years old, and it was just kind of a lack of things to do. I grew up in a house without electricity, running water, you know, in Canada, and I started playing guitar. You know, there was a guitar around. I started writing songs and did that, yeah, until I moved to Toronto. I came here to play music, but then ended up going to college, and it was kind of, you know, my career started taking off, I guess, during the pandemic. I spent the first year of the pandemic interviewing my grandfather, and then, you know, after a year, I had kind of listened to those recordings, and then I wrote a song. I wrote 2 songs, and decided I'd make an album. I thought it would take maybe, you know, 4 or 5 years when I wasn't too tired from work to kind of work on this project. Then I met Amanda Rayom and Shoshona Kish from Ishkade Records, one of the first Indigenous and women-owned labels in the country, and they asked me what I was working on. I told them, and yeah, they signed me. They signed me. I didn't even have a record done. You know, it's very rare in the music industry to sign somebody with no track record. No one's really heard of them. They don't even have a record ready for them to listen to. So they took a chance on me, and, you know, flash forward a year and a half, we went to the Junos. We got Polaris Prize nominated. We got all these, you know, accolades as far as the music industry, but the biggest thing for me is, you know, we got to put out this record, and we got to put out the record we wanted to, and how we wanted to put it out, and you know, it's a record of a, you know, very heavy conversation, heavy topic. It talks about residential school and my grandfather's experience. So, you know, I've had residential school survivors reach out to me and say, you know, they found this this record healing, and they were finally like happy to hear our stories told by our people and our words. So, you know, it's been an absolutely kind of whirlwind year. You know, from playing music in my living room during lockdown to playing, you know, the biggest stages in the country.
I can imagine. And you mentioned your grandfather. Can you tell us more about your grandfather's influence on your music and in shaping your artistic path?
Yeah, so my grandfather, like the album we put out in November is written in call and response, and they're all his stories, you know. And so it isn't just music, it's part journalism. I used to work as a journalist too, actually. So like, you know, it's kind of these two worlds kind of colliding, and so yeah, it's storytelling, it's music, and it's my grandfather's story, and it's not, you know, sadly it's not an uncommon story. Like, that story is the story of a lot of Indigenous families across the country.
It is indeed, and being selected to perform on the Canada Day stage is an honor. How does it feel to have this opportunity, especially representing the Indigenous community at a time when many more Canadians are rethinking how they mark the country's birthday?
Yeah, first off, yeah, like I'm honored to be invited, to be asked to play. But it doesn't come without mixed feelings. I have a lot of peers who turn down Canada Day shows because, you know, a lot of things have been coming to light, things that Indigenous people have already been talking about for years, decades. And, but I don't know, for me, I think, you know, strong dialogue still needs to happen, and it has been happening. Obviously, strong action needs to happen more, but you know, it's important for Indigenous people to be in these spaces. You know, we're here too, and we need to be able to kind of hold space and you know, tell our stories through our music, and you know, it's a day of celebration, but it's also a day of reflection, and so I'm happy to be a part of that reflection.
That was Akin Abbey joining us from Ottawa earlier today, and that is Global National for this Saturday. I'm Neetu Garcha. Tonight's Year Canada is the Rogers Centre in Toronto, where the Blue Jays are in action with special red and white uniforms in front of a sellout crowd for Canada Day. To mark the occasion, the team held a variety of pre-game celebrations, including a Canadian citizenship ceremony where some of our newest citizens got to throw a ceremonial pitch. Thanks so much for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Have a great night.